Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill Shane Beamer, the South Carolina Gamecocks, getting some massive news late Saturday night out of the transfer portal. Former Missouri edge rusher Jaylen Brown committing to South Carolina out of the portal. And look, Jaylen Brown is not a household name if you do not follow the high school recruiting trail closely. This was a guy that was fascinating coming out of the 2024 class, was a true freshman at Missouri, only played in 4 games, was not really a contributor as a true freshman. What I think we're looking at here, Dill, is the Dylan Stewart effect. When you have success like that with a true freshman like Dylan Stewart, you are going to see talented edge rushers look at South Carolina and say, that's where I want to go play my football. And I would add Kyle Kennard. I mean, Kyle Kennard came over to South Carolina. He was solid at Georgia Tech. He was an elite. Kyle Kennard becomes the lead at South Carolina. Sterling Lucas doing a phenomenal job with that position group. And when you show that kind of development, that is going to attract athletes like Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown is a freaky dude with a lot of upside given the right development. That's the recipe to building a good defensive line. Just stack guys like this on your defensive line. Chances are you're going to have a pretty damn good unit. And you look at South Carolina's defensive line in 2024, I don't think it was much better. I mean, top 10 stop in the run, top 10 sack in the quarterback. This was an elite group. And when you start putting seasons like that, kind of like what you saw with Georgia, it just attracts for the other good players. They want to be a part of it. Fired up to get into this one, fired up to get into a couple other names that I want to talk about before we get into it. As always, to the South Carolina fans, it was a blast talking this team at the end of 2024. It's been a blast previewing the transfer portal. All the support the South Carolina fans have shown to the boys has been amazing. We appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We said this at the jump, Dill. This is going to be a fun team to talk about over the next couple of weeks, because you talk about those teams that I think players are looking at and saying, I want to be part of it. South Carolina is at the top of the list. Jaylen Brown, how are we feeling about it?
I mean, I think you kind of said it. Like, I look at this exactly like I look at a big recruiting win, and you kind of look at where South Carolina is at. I mean, they're starting to develop guys at a really high level. You just want to keep adding more pieces that have the talent and the upside of a guy like Dylan Stewart. And you're starting to see that develop, but it doesn't look like a Georgia defensive line room yet, or one of those elite defensive line rooms. But as you said, like, when you start to put that type of guy into the draft, you're going to have a couple probably get drafted this year, especially from the interior room. I think you can start landing this type of talent. And then once you stack those classes deeper, I think you start to have, like, instead of having like those windows of opportunity, you're just year after year having really good defensive lines. It doesn't have to wait till like your 3 guys in the interior matriculate and play awesome.
What you're talking about is developing a pipeline. You know what I mean? Like a pipeline of guys. So you're going to have guys like TJ Sanders and Kyle Kennard go to the NFL draft. Well, guess what? You got Dylan Stewart, guy like Jaylen Brown kind of working their way up. Jaylen Brown, to get into the player a little bit more, I had to go back and look at some of the notes I had when he was coming out of high school. Dill, I thought he played on the inside when he was coming out, because this is a guy with a big frame that was 260 coming out. I kind of figured he'd just get up to around 290, 300 and play at the 3-tech. Sounds like he wants to stay out on the edge long. I mean, he's got some long arms, some big hands. There was a reason he was a top 150 national prospect coming out of high school because of those traits. Sterling Lucas has got to be licking his chops to work with a guy like Jaylen Brown. There's a reason he's the number 6 edge rusher in the transfer portal. It's not what he's done in college. It's what he can do given the right development. And I trust Sterling Lucas in terms of getting the best out of a guy like Jaylen Brown. I'm really excited for this one. Again, it's not a household name. This is a guy that could be a household name come 2025 and in 2026. And Dill, kind of a very similar story here. You know, South Carolina's going to go kick the tires on Gabriel Brown-Ladindi. This is a guy that's flashed but has not played a ton for Texas A&M, former 5-star recruit coming out of high school. The difference between Jaylen Brown and a guy like Brown-Ladindi is you're going into year 4 with Gabriel Brown-Ladindi, so you got to figure out, hey, is there something we can tap into that you haven't tapped into the last 3 years, where Jaylen Brown's kind of a young pup with a lot of development. That doesn't change the God-given gifts that Gabriel Brown-Ladindi has. Him coming out of high school was an absolute freak show. Long, violent, powerful hands that tested phenomenally well. Look, you had some coaching change at Texas A&M. You had some certainly like some culture stuff with Jimbo Fisher going on. I could see this kid in the right environment being a really good football player. And if that place is South Carolina, this is a guy that's hard to say no to out of the transfer portal because of all the traits he comes to the table with.
And I still look like he did have a really good bowl game in 2023 in that game against
He's
Oklahoma State.
flashed.
Like, there
Yeah.
was that moment, like, I thought he was going to be a huge part of this Texas A&M defensive line heading into this year. And you said it, obviously the coaching change, and they brought in a lot of older guys in the transfer portal to play that
Yeah.
defensive line role, and he just didn't really get his crack. But again, I kind of looked, and after that bowl game, I was like, okay, he'll probably be a part of this unit. South Carolina, I think they're taking, because again, we talk about building the depth through that unit. They're going to lose a lot of guys in the interior just by the nature of, like, they were old, experienced guys. TJ Sanders. I mean, I'd be surprised if he doesn't go to the draft because he played that
Oh, he's
well.
got it. Yeah.
But either way, you're still going to have to deal with replacing a lot of pieces. Gabriel Brown-Lodindi, I mean, I don't think he's just pure potential because, again, I thought we saw him play a really good game against Oklahoma State. We just haven't seen him play that much.
Kind of what you said. Like, you want your defensive line filled with guys that look like Jaylen Brown and Gabriel Brown-Lodindi, and you have good coaches on the staff, which we clearly have seen in terms of defensive line development. Trust your coaches to get the best out of those guys on the defensive line. Give us the good athletes. We'll make them good football players. Jaylen Brown, Gabriel Brown-Lodindi, they looked the part. Now trust your coaching staff to get the best out of them. The last one I want to talk about, I think this is fascinating. I know you don't love it as much, but I certainly do. O'Mega Blake from Charlotte, familiar name for the South Carolina fans, right? Was committed to South Carolina, played for South Carolina before transferring to Charlotte. Dill, I would love this story. Look, O'Mega Blake was not a difference maker for South Carolina his first couple of years. Decides, hey, I want to go get an opportunity to play more, get better as a football player, goes to Charlotte, averages 25 yards per reception at Charlotte, catches for over 790 yards. He got his experience. He got his shot. He took advantage of it. Now back in the portal, going to visit South Carolina. What did we talk about going into the transfer portal about what kind of wide receiver should South Carolina go out and get? Go get the big bodies that can work vertically down the field. Because what does Lenore Sellers do best as a quarterback? Push the ball down the field. O'Mega Blake, 25 yards per reception. They'll sign me up for this kid coming back to South Carolina and being a difference maker for them in 2025.
I mean, fair enough, because another room you probably want to continue to build some depth through and make it just a more competitive room. And you started to see it kind of shape up, let's say, the way I think you would have wanted to see it earlier. It took some time because at the beginning of the year, I think a lot of South Carolina fans were looking. Lenora Sellers was taking a bit of a beating for some of the problems on the offense side. That wide receiver room was not playing well enough.
100%.
You look at the development of some of those guys. Nick Harbor really started to turn on a little bit. And some of the other guys, like, that unit turned into a pretty good unit. But again, certainly not a bad thing to add some more competition because you don't want to have to wait till 6 weeks in for it.
It's all about maximizing Lenore Sellers. And one of the best ways you can maximize him is give him guys on the outside, specifically guys that fit what Lenore Sellers does well. And I think O'Mega Blake is one of those guys. I think it'd be a sweet story. And again, it's not to say South Carolina doesn't have wide receivers that excite me. I don't think I'm excited for a wide receiver more than I am for Nick Harbor going into 2025. Look, we knew it'd be we knew it wouldn't be immediate, right? I thought Nick Harbor should have been an edge rusher coming out of high school. And then people thought he was going to be a tight end, wants to stay at wide receiver. The light did not turn on for a season and a half. That light was flickering towards the end of 2024. If that thing turns on in 2025, Dill, that kid is going to be special. And then you look at Mazeo Bennett, who was extremely impressive as a true freshman. You look at Mike Smith at tight end. I think you want to add some veterans, some proven commodities, O'Mega Blake being one of them. But, hey, the wide receiver position in the portal is loaded. We talked about it yesterday with the South Carolina fans. I think they got the right approach. Hey, Casey Concepcion's interested in coming to South Carolina, but if it's going to be a bidding war for him, go down that list. And there are so many more wide receivers that I think fit this offense that you don't have to get into a bidding war with. And O'Mega Blake might be one of those guys. We'll see how South Carolina goes. And Dill, we talked about this yesterday too. It's not the flashiest thing. It's more fun to talk about guys like Jaylen Brown committing to South Carolina. Roster retention has been elite for South. Like, I guarantee you, feelers were sent out to guys like Dylan Stewart, Lenore Sellers. South Carolina They took care of their backyard first. They took care of the stuff that was in their house. Now they're going out and bringing some more players in. That's kind of how you want to do it in the transfer portal, especially when you have a young.
Another thing, like South Carolina, when they get that place rolling and there's a lot of energy, like they don't take in terms of like their motivation from the fan base and their resources. Like they can galvanize it, get it together with the best of them. So it's not a team like I don't look at them like a feeder program, like some of these teams that, oh, if I had a really good player, yeah, Texas is coming, Georgia's coming, Ohio State's coming. Like that's not South Carolina when South Carolina is doing what they need to do on the field.
South Carolina it's a train that's picking up momentum. You either get on the train, get off the tracks. I'm fired up. It's going to be fun next couple of weeks. Yeah, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.